Cool. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Yeah. When's the last time I saw you? Over a year ago.
Over a year ago. It would have been back in the old Burrard office.
Yeah.
The old Burrard office.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a little bit. I think we've talked more since then than we had previously.
Yeah. We got a lot in common now.
Yeah.
If we didn't already.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say. Yeah. Usually, what I do on these, I just kind of like introduce people a little bit.
Okay.
So maybe I'll do a trial, try to explain what you do and who you are, and then you correct me.
All right. That sounds that sounds
like more fun than you just going on a monologue.
Okay. Let's go for it.
Okay. So this is Kevin Parton that I'm here with,
Yeah.
and Kevin is a financial advisor of something like 15 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he looks almost as young as me.
Been doing this for another 45 years.
And recently embarked on a new expedition. So yeah, why don't you tell me how I did?
It's a good start. It's definitely the Coles notes. So it's not dissimilarly as we started at the same firm once upon a time, and then moved on to the next chapter. Almost a year ago to the day now, I left and joined an independent Vela Wealth. Started in North Vancouver and got introduced to them through some mutual connections. And it kind of was where I was at a stage in the career, sort of the journey of being an entrepreneur and wanting to do that and some independence that goes along with doing that. And so now it's been a year. It's been enough experience under my belt in a new environment to know what I love, what the difference is, and also not enough time to figure everything out and realize how much I didn't know before making the move in the first place. But
Nice.
It's been exciting so far.
That's good. So what would you say is like the main project you're working on these days? Like what's taking up like a good bulk of your time?
There's a few things that I'm working on right now. One of them is systems and processes, if you will, or standard operating procedures. My brain, as I've learned over time, operates that way. I sort of look at larger pictures, where things are efficient, where they're not efficient, where they can be more operational, and I try and view it through the lens of customer or client experience. And so that's one of the things I tried to do at a practice level over the last 5 years, and now at Vela, having a hand in how we operate as an organization. Okay. So I'm spending time sort of looking at what exists, what doesn't, what's formal, what's not, and then working with a little bit of a larger team to help make sure that we're continuing to grow and improve. And that sort of scratches, again, an entrepreneurial itch to create a system and an experience that is ever improving. There's also my practice, which I'm excited about developing and sort of having pivoted a little bit since the move. So that's taking up some of my time in a meaningful way, and I'm kind of embarking on a new project, but it's in the really early stages, and I'm working on it between 4 and 5:30 every morning. So I'll keep
4 and 5:30 in the morning, like a.m.
A.m.
Oh,
it's early, but it's quiet in the house with kids. So it's the only time that I can do that.
Right.
And so it's early stages, but I'm going to keep it secret for the time being because it's early enough on in the process that
I'm guessing you're not staying up to 4:30 in the morning. You're going to sleep at a reasonable hour and then waking up early.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And since getting up, since starting to get up,
I would have done it the other. I probably would go the other way. But.
Yeah. No, since starting to get up early in the morning, my bedtime gets earlier and earlier. And I was joking with some people the other day that I'm having to explain to my 3 and 6 year old why they need to go to bed because it's past dad's bedtime.
You know what's really weird is I could never be like, I don't think I will ever be a morning person.
Have you, and this is an interesting point, have you tried to be a morning person?
Yes. Several times.
Do you find there being a benefit to getting up early in the morning?
So the only time that I will get up early in the morning is when I'm on vacation. Weird thing to say, but.
And is it like a natural you get up early in the morning?
Yeah, I think because my body's already getting all messed up from the time change.
Yeah.
That somehow if Like I just somehow end up waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning when I'm
Okay.
on vacation.
Yeah.
But
Which
when
is-
I'm here, when I'm in Vancouver, I could never wake up early.
Curious. Do you stay up late naturally?
Yeah, that's something. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's I read a number of books, but I think the book is When, Science of When. Anyways, but it talks about how people have different circadian rhythms, and in a number of the issues in that book, it's like, why starting something on the first of the month or the first of a week or the first, like there's benefit to timing of things, but one of them is your natural circadian rhythm, and at different ages in life, you operate more effectively later on. So there's conversation around why like high school starting earlier or as early as it is disadvantageous to teens because it takes them longer. But there are certain people who are like quote unquote night owls. Yeah. And if they try and operate within a 9 to 5 work format, you're constantly swimming upstream. So for some people, that's justifiable. So I don't operate well in the morning. So trying to get up early is really just not your efficient state, your most optimal
So
state.
you don't operate well in the morning?
I love operating in the morning.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily love, like when my alarm goes off at 4, I still have yet to like be super stoked that my alarm's going off at 4. But I do find that I am so much better throughout the day. And so for a long time, I'd get up at 5 to go to the gym. And so I'd get my exercise in the morning, and that was kind of like the best way for me to start the day. And then everything else that came afterwards was always felt better because of that. But how could I possibly get up earlier than that? That's insane. And comparatively, 5 a.m. is earlier than most people. So why would I get up earlier? And recently, I realized that if there was certain things that I wanted to get into my day that required peace and quiet and alone time, it wasn't happening after the family was awake. And tended to not happen in the evening, so I needed to start my day earlier. So 4 o'clock became the earlier unreasonable time that I would wake up. And as much as, like I said, I don't necessarily enjoy when the alarm goes off, I'm finding now being able to incorporate an hour of personal work and the gym every morning before most people wake up just skyrockets the momentum of how I get through the rest of my day.
Very interesting. Yeah, my mind was bubbling about all these things like... So every day you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and for an hour you work on this project.
Yeah.
5 days a week, 7 days a week.
So if it's 35 days in a row is what I did, and that was
That's sort of super disciplined.
Yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge that I got into.
Who taught you to be like that?
I don't know if anyone taught me to be like that. It's something that I'm developing, and more so this year. And again, this is part of the project is discipline. And there's components of like what makes somebody disciplined and how do you inspire somebody or how do you inspire yourself to be consistently disciplined, and how do you decide what you want to be disciplined for? And so to that end there's so many things you can do that seem exciting or that are inspirational, and you can be motivated by external factors. And there's just a lot of people who tend to not be disciplined, and they associate sort of a moral failure with not being disciplined, or a laziness, or a lack of willpower. And I think at the core of a lot of it is just not understanding those things. It's, well, what is a core value of yours that you would want to work towards a goal? So align your goals with your core values. What is the type of person you want to become? Pick a goal that is in line with that. And a lot of people will pick goals that maybe don't align with a core value. Or they'll pick an outcome, but without a habit that associates with it. So discipline can be very, very difficult if you're working towards something that isn't intrinsically motivating. Or discipline can be very, very difficult if you associate success with the eventuality of accomplishing a goal versus winning the day. So that's where discipline through sheer stubbornness or accomplishing goals through sheer stubbornness has been something that I've worked on for a long time, but found that burnout or a lack of fulfillment was associated with that. And now I'm working on discipline through value alignment. And that's what's motivating me to get up 35 days in a row at 4 a.m. because I'm doing something that is meaningful to me. And it's the behavior that I'm rewarding myself for versus the outcome of what that behavior is going to yield.
So this is very interesting. I know we're kind of going on a side topic here, but like, so whenever I get too disciplined on something, I find that I lose creativity.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Possibly, but say more.
Same what?
Say more. Like, what do you mean if you get too disciplined?
So I find that like I get in my what do they call it? Creative zone, flow state. So
Yeah.
I get into my flow state when I feel like there's no deadline that I'm trying to accomplish. There's no preordained time that I have from now to a certain time, and like I get really, really motivated on something when I know I have like the whole day to work on it.
Okay. So I've two major questions. One is you said that being too disciplined loses creativity. What would too disciplined look like in the context of your existing format? Like,
So my Wednesdays are super disciplined.
yeah.
Tuesdays kind of, Thursdays kind of. So I am less creative on Wednesdays,
Okay.
I would say.
Right. So making the space then
Yeah.
on a day to be creative.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean,
It's just a feeling I have.
Which-
I don't know. I don't have any studies to back it up.
okay. This is fair because I wonder because I'm like I get the whole concept of like
Yeah.
it's in between this time and this time that I need to be creative, which makes things a little bit difficult. And you talked about having a deadline. What I'm finding is, and maybe sort of the answer to that is I'm not creating a deadline for myself. The goal is to do the thing. So from a creative perspective, it's here's the hour, be creative, whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. And then there's sort of consistency in that. And that's kind of the old Jerry Seinfeld model, which is like, just don't break the chain. Do something creative, write jokes for a certain amount of time every day. And some days they'll be garbage. Some days they'll be genius. But as time goes on, the consistency will start to yield more results, and you'll find that creativity starts to form through the consistency.
True.
So
That is
that's
true.
where I guess to me it's just that like just do it for the sake of doing it, which then ties into itself as do something that you love.
True.
Because it's the act of doing it. If you're really loving content creation, then you enjoy the experience versus the like I'm only doing this so I can get an outcome. Then discipline is like, well, I'm keep doing this thing I don't like.
Yeah,
And there's only
yeah.
so long you can do that before you stop losing creativity because it's not enjoyable in the first place, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess it also depends on how you're going to define creativity, because like true creativity is iterative. It doesn't just like pop into your mind. It's like you work on something so many times and you're like, oh, here's a slightly better way of doing it. Oh, here's a slightly better way of doing it.
Yeah.
And then you come up with this creative thing that seems creative, but really it's through hours and hours of iterative trying to create what you're trying to create, and then that's truly, I think.
Yeah,
creative.
I think so. Well, and I think, again, how you view creativity. Again, I was listening to a podcast with Rick Rubin, and he was talking about his book, but the whole idea that like creativity can be choosing a different route home from work in the car because of traffic. Like everything can be viewed through this is a creative lens, which I've oddly tried to explain to my wife that financial planning is a creative
Super
outlet,
creative, yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, well, there's so many moving parts, and like, one answer isn't always going to be the right answer. There isn't a definitive yes or no to these things, and that's a creative process. Now, explaining that to someone who views financial planning as the same as watching paint dry, it's hard for them to associate creativity with that, but to each their own. So I think it's on the day that you're working, you're being creative. I would imagine in
Yeah.
the interactions with clients, there's creativity to how the conversation goes.
Okay, so you know what actually I'm probably maybe confusing is I think creativity and being artistic are two different things, I think.
Okay.
Like I guess those are very two different things. Creativity, being creative, and being artistic.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could describe the difference between the two of them, but maybe like video content would be, or what, like the TikTok, that would be sort of an artistic thing.
Yeah.
And-
If someone forced me to define the difference between the two, I'd probably say artistic is feeling free and then capturing what your thoughts are
Okay.
and putting that into some form of art, music, painting,
Yeah. Okay.
whatever. And then creativity, I would say, would be an iterative process where you create something that no one's created before. That's probably how if someone put a gun to my head.
I will accept both of those as reasonable definitions. What I also found really interesting, I found it for myself, is you're doing something on the other 4 days a week that you're not either running meetings or prepping or doing the follow-up work. But you're only referring to what you've done on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as work. The other stuff you haven't defined as work.
True. Yeah.
Which is interesting. 'Cause I've very much done the same thing. Is when I get up and work on something from 4 to 5 in the morning, it's a hobby. It's a thing.
True. Oh,
And so I
okay,
have learned, and I'm trying to change, is learn to associate a revenue generating activity, direct revenue, as work, and in something that's not yet revenue generating or something I find as being creative and fun as not work. So I don't know if you find the same, or you sort of pairing like something that's more creative and fun as not work, and then the thing that generates revenue or maybe isn't fun but harder as work.
Oh yeah, 100%. So like the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, I'm like, mainly the Wednesdays though, I'm like doing the financial plans. I'm coming up with strategies for people. I'm designing portfolios. I'm like reading people and figuring out if they're like scared of a certain strategy or like happy with it, or if they're not saying something that they want to be saying, and then I have to pull it out of them, and then I change things for them or suggest something different or whatever, or you're closing a new client or something like that. Like that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Those ones, like, that kind of exhaust me. I don't know about you. When you bring on a new client,
it totally can. And I think sometimes just the engaged interaction, and especially I think if you're running a full day of meetings, because there's unpredictability, there's emotions, there's so many moving parts, there's a level of sort of gravity to what you're doing. I find, on a day where I'm running multiple meetings, by the end of it, I'm exhausted. Now, I think there might be people who are completely charged. They get to the end of the day, and that's what gives them energy. From what I know of you, that's probably a developed skill set, but you're kind of like, what do they call that mixture between extrovert and introvert? Or like you're good at being extroverted when you need to be, but it doesn't necessarily, like, you also need that introverted time for yourself to recharge.
Yeah, I can see that. It's very few and far between for me, but yeah, no, I think even like extroverts, like no one's 100% extrovert. So I think anyone who's an extrovert also needs their alone time.
Yeah. But so maybe that's a perfect balance then, is instead of feeling like anyone needs to do meetings 5 days a week or do the hard work 5 days a week, or in order to not view it as stuff that burns you out, you need to have that mix. You're better on Wednesdays because you're not seeing people the other 6 days a week. And so that's why I asked him, like, it sounds crazy when you describe it as I work 1 day a week, but when you kind of distill that down, we're like, well, you're doing a part of the work.
Yeah.
But creating TikTok videos or podcasts, like that's work. It's I
don't consider this work.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Which
is something that I'm starting to learn, is that why not? Yeah. Why can't this be considered work? If you do this and you do it well, and you create value, and through that value, it brings people in the front door, or it gets you introduced to other people. True. Like, there's a reason that people like podcasts, and there's a reason that, Sirius XM is paying $150 million to move people over to their channel. Like, so this can evolve into something that generates revenue, which means that you could be working and doing something that doesn't feel like work at the same time. Which, again, it's like mind blown. But that's where I think even just the perspective that people have on, like, what is work? And I, for a long time, thought that work is the thing that you do that exhausts you, or thing is the hard thing. And then this is a hobby. But it could be that work is what you love to do. It just takes time and commitment.
Yeah. No, it all depends what you define. I think it's the things that you've done a lot that you're truly an expert at. Those are the things I think that tend to feel a little bit more like work.
Right.
Because like if I was, I'm not going to try to pretend I can get in the head of Joe Rogan, but if I was Joe Rogan, like, he might not enjoy doing podcasts that much anymore. I mean, maybe he does.
Right.
You'll never know. That's something I've realized, is you'll never ever know what's going on in someone's head. Even when they tell you, like, you don't know if it's true. And also, they're never going to be able to give you a full picture. But I want to go back to bring on a new client, because I'm curious what exhausts you about it versus what exhausts me. Like, one of the things that exhausts me about the new client, like bring on the new client thing, and I was saying this to my brother last weekend because he had his bachelor party in Vegas. Yeah. And like, we were talking about like gambling, because we did some blackjack and stuff, And I'm like, yeah, the blackjack, like, it's fun to try to beat the dealer, but like, I don't feel nervous because there's like $100 or $500 on the table or whatever there is. I encounter situations where if I don't bring on a new client, there's like $20,000 on the table. And so I'm like $500 on the table, that's nothing compared to 20,000 or 50,000 or whatever it is on the table. And it's like, if you don't perform properly or whatever, do your job properly, and then they're not a client, and then you lose that money. And the interesting thing is what my brother said back to me, because he has a business too. He brings on new clients.
Yeah.
He's in the he doesn't like to talk about his work much, so let's just call it like the painting industry.
Okay.
But he kind of says like, oh, I'm never nervous when I'm talking to a new client, because I know that our company is like the only company that does what we do, really.
Right.
And we're the best anyways. So if they decide not to go with us, it's not because I didn't do a good job. It's because they're not ready for the service.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh yeah, I don't get nervous at all, even if it's a big deal. I'm like, yeah, but you're in a different industry. Like, you kind of have a monopoly in your industry in our province. So that's why I'm not going to say it, because it's a monopoly type industry. But but in our industry, there's so much competition that it's like you're always competing against some other firm.
Totally. So that's the exhausting part for you is the what's on the table.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that's probably the most exhausting part of it, I think.
And is that tied to, like, I totally relate to so much of this, but is that tied to wanting to always, like, to bring on every new client that you could possibly work with? Is it, what do you think it ties back to? Like, is it financial? Like, you're in a position where, like, I need that money for this particular thing, or is it I need that new client, or there's a target I've set for myself, or is there like a value? Like, because your brother's in a position where
he doesn't need the sale, I guess, that kind of thing.
And there's many people who might not need the sale, but still view it that same way. So there's something about that transaction, or that win or loss, or yes from a client or no, that doesn't have anything to do with, like, I need the money, but they can still approach it through the same, like, I'm stressed if I don't get it. So I'm always curious, as I was for myself, well, what is it then if it's not the need for the money? I
guess I look at it as like, oh wow, this would be such a good impact, or such a big impact for our business. So I'm like we have a good situation. We have 107 families, close to 70 million under management now. And it's quite manageable. Like 107 families is that's like the perfect number. Yeah. And so then if we're going to bring on someone who has like $4 million or something, I kind of look at that as like, okay, well, that's a good 5%. Is that 5% roughly? Oh, more. That's like almost an 8% increase in our business revenue. Yeah. I just kind of look at that and I'm like, wow, that's like, this would be really good for our business. So like, I can't afford to not have this stick, I guess. Yeah. That's kind of, so. Yeah. So maybe I'm making this is probably something I should talk to like a business coach about or something, but I'm making maybe an undue pressure on myself, which is probably hurting my process. I think, well, I wouldn't imagine you're alone. I'm the same boat. I literally had a meeting yesterday, with a new potential client, where before the meeting I tried to sort of like, what are the key things that are important? How are we uniquely different? Be authentically yourself. And like what your brother said, is like, well, they will or they won't. But if they make the decision not to, it's not because I wouldn't have done anything different. They themselves are making this decision. However, in the meeting, there's that voice in your head that's like, you got to win this. And like, if they say no, it's because of you. And so it's for me, it's working myself out of that. But it's the same reason that there's like sports psychology coaches, where like if you're an athlete who's made it to the major leagues, I think it's generally pretty understood that you're good at what you do, yet there are slumps. You get up to the plate and then you get in your head. And instead of focusing on why I'm here and what are the mechanics and I know what I'm doing and, you know, if I'm doing my game right, like there's all the reasons why you swing that bat, referring to baseball now, and you're going to win some, lose some,
But like the more you start to worry about, well, what's my on base percentage and how many home runs do I hit? And like everyone's looking at me. Well, that tends to be what causes you to play worse. So it's this weird like downward spiral. So yeah, I'm with you in that whole space, but I'm trying really hard. Again, a lot of this year for me is working on like, well, why am I different? And lean into that. So, you know, in the context of a $4 million client, that $4 million client should be good if they fit with how you run your practice.
That's true. That's true. And there's people who definitely don't fit. And I, like, regardless of how much money they have, I have this rule. No one client is more valuable than the whole.
Yeah.
Than the entire client base. So
yeah.
even if that client is equal to your whole client base, like if you had one $70 million client,
yeah,
like they don't supersede all the rest of them.
If they're crushing your soul,
Yeah.
it's not worth it. And I don't know that there's an answer. Again, if you go into, like, if it's an ideal client, like, you know, good portfolio, good complexity, like, there's just certain things where you're like, that's the client I would want to work with. I'm being as authentically me as possible. And then they go somewhere else. I don't know that ever doesn't suck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
And there may be a component of like, well, that didn't work out well, but there is a peace of mind in that some things are out of your control. You can prepare. I try and prepare as much for a meeting, like, so the things that are within my control, you know, how much did I prepare? How much did I know? How much am I studying? How good of a financial planner am I? If I'm controlling all of those things and then I go into that meeting, I'm me, and I didn't get that business, just being like, that's just the way it needed to go.
It's true. Yeah, that means they're just not a good fit.
It's not a good fit, or there's something I need to do, but like I couldn't have done it any differently.
True.
I find the insecurity for me, or for most people, can come from a lack of preparation. If you go into that meeting and it didn't go well and you're like, I didn't do my due diligence, I didn't prepare for that, well, now you could have changed the outcome. You might have been able to influence it. And so you'll never know in that case, was it because I didn't give my all, or were they not a right fit? So I think if you're trying at all points in time to just lead with your best foot forward.
True. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, you can chalk it up to that. Most people who don't become clients are just generally not a good fit for your business. Yeah.
And I had an interesting conversation the other day with somebody about being niche, because if you're niche in what you do, or you only work with a certain demographic, then you presumably are saying no to a lot more people than you say yes to, which can feel strange in a business where you're trying to grow. But to your point is, you think of the number of people that exist, you only need 100 or 150 households to work with. And so it may take a little bit long anyway. So all of that for me is to say that, like, if someone says no to you or you say no to somebody else, it doesn't mean the end of the world. And remembering that in the moment it can feel stressful, but hopefully in the big picture it's not a big deal. But I totally relate to, like, being exhausted at the end of those days. These are the mental hoops I'm jumping through before, during, and afterwards. And so, like, I went to bed early last night.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. What time do you go to bed?
I try and start winding down at like 8:30.
Okay, that's pretty late.
Yeah, so like in the summertime, all of this is really based around family dynamic. But our girls were going to sleep at like 8 or 8:30, which is later than usual. But so then there'd invariably be half an hour afterwards before I'd start to wind down. But now that they're back in school, or school has started, we're trying to do 7:30. So if there's an hour of time between when they go down and when I start to get into bed, that's great, because there's a certain nighttime routine I want. But yeah, I'd say 8:30 to 9:30 is when I go to bed, and then 4 o'clock is when I wake up. I can see you do that.
Yeah, so you're still getting 7 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm more of a 11:30 at night type of bedtime.
Yeah, when do you wake up?
7-ish.
Okay.
But sometimes a little earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you try?
It's not because I want to.
It's because life starts.
It's because life starts at 7 a.m. or earlier. Yeah, and there's that's just how it goes. Yeah. But no, I mean, once I'm up, I'm fine. Like, it's all good. But I always make it my goal to be in bed by like 10, and then it's 11:30.
Yeah. And how do what does the nighttime routine look like for you? If you have a routine.
Gosh, nighttime routine. It would probably be like cleaning up the house.
Yeah.
Just cleaning up the house, and then probably a little bit of like TV or YouTube or something, some podcasts or something on Netflix, or like maybe booking a trip or something. Like I'm doing something kind of relaxing in the evening, and then just 11 rolls around. I'm like, oh crap, gotta go to bed. And then it's like brushing up, getting ready, washing up for bed.
What do you listen to for podcasts? Do you have like regular podcasts you listen to, or do you bounce around? And like, what
I kind of do is I'll like go on TikTok, and I'll like, do you have TikTok?
I do not.
No?
So I'm going to ask you probably more questions about TikTok because I've stayed away, which makes me feel older and older every day.
I've just submitted because I figure everyone's hacked. So I'm just like, you know what, we're all hacked. Like, don't tell me I'm going to get hacked because you're hacked too.
Yeah.
So that's what my defense is.
Okay.
But I just I'll scroll through TikTok, and I'll see like somebody have like an interesting like 10-second podcast or something with somebody, like because the TikToks, the videos are only 10 to 40 seconds long, most of them.
Okay.
And so I think that's just the nature of TikTok. And so, yeah, if I see something that seems interesting, I'll be like, oh, this person has like a new podcast, or like, oh, this person interviewed like that guy. Oh, I've been wanting to hear, like, I wanted to, like, for instance, I'll see Elon Musk and who's that professor?
Huberman.
No, the psychology professor guy.
Adam Grant?
No, Canadian.
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. Yes.
I was throwing names until one of them works.
So horrible with names. And so I saw like Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk. I'm like, oh, I haven't watched that one yet.
Okay.
Or like I'll see like a Kamala Harris, Donald Trump clip. I'll be like, oh shoot, I haven't watched the presidential debate yet.
Okay.
And so I'm like watching. That's kind of like I'm catching up on stuff.
Now, does it then? I mean, TikTok has presumably figured out what you're interested in, and that's how it's like recommending them to you.
Yeah, I love TikTok.
Yeah, okay. How did you get into it? Because it's kind of one of those things where I feel like it's gone on too long that I've been not involved.
So TikTok is super forgiving to anybody who's new. It's like they know you're new, and they'll still promote your stuff.
Okay.
If what you're saying is like unique.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like interesting. It's got a spin that no one's done before, which is everybody.
Yeah.
And so they'll pump your content when you're new. Like
Okay.
I've seen people, they started in May, and like their 7th video gets 1 million or 2 million views, and then they just keep going. They keep going. They ride that wave.
Yeah.
And then like it's 6 months later, they got 75,000 followers and like 10 million views. I've seen it like time and time again. I like study them.
So do you follow people, or is TikTok kind of used more of just like, I'll only watch the videos that rank well, and so you have to be creating regular content? Because like whereas before is if you created a good video and also get a bunch of followers and then everybody sees what you post, does TikTok change that algorithm? So like you've got to be constantly creating viral videos, or no one's going to see your stuff even if they follow you?
Okay, so here's the really interesting thing about TikTok. Followers don't matter.
Yeah, okay.
So they matter when someone clicks on your profile and they see you have 100,000 followers. They matter for like a resume, but in terms of getting your content seen, they don't really matter that much. It's the content and the value of your videos. So there's people like, so I have like, I don't know, 11,000 or 10,000 followers.
Okay.
On TikTok, but there's people who actually have maybe just like a little more, like 20,000.
Yeah.
But they are way more popular than me on TikTok.
Okay.
Like it just so happens that like people aren't clicking the follow button.
Okay.
Like there's people that you'll see on TikTok and that you're going to see them again. So there's no need to even follow them.
Yeah.
They just keep showing up on your feed, and you don't need to follow them for them to show up on your feed.
Yeah.
And so like I think it's way more important to be like, okay, like what's more valuable is like someone who has 100,000 followers, but when they post they get like 5,000 or 10,000 views, whatever. That is way less valuable than someone who has 25,000 followers, but every 7th video they get like 5 million views, 8 million views, 4 million views. And there's a lot of people out there that are like that. Some videos don't warrant the follow. Like you have to, the only way, like the way you get a lot of followers is what I learned on TikTok is you have to like, people have to like look at you and be like, I want my life to be like that person's life.
Yeah.
And I need to be doing what that person's doing. And it's like you talk about some kind of thing that you're doing, and then they click the follow. I think that's what makes the follow
That's
button.
the follow, is they want to be like you versus the I was entertained by that video.
Exactly, yeah.
If you make another one that's entertaining, I'll see that when it pops up.
Yeah.
Because I'd heard, like,
Yeah.
I follow Gary Vee
Yeah.
on social media and everywhere else. And I think it was him who was saying that it used to be that you could create one good video or one something,
Yeah.
and then everyone would follow you, and now they would see everything you posted, even if it was garbage.
That's not
and
the case.
now
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
you
yeah.
need to be a good content creator and original,
Yeah.
which is sort of pushing the whole like be authentic, create
Yeah.
stuff that's unique, take a risk, because if you're just being generic, that's going to fall to the bottom, and you're going to end up. So it sort of tells with that, like you could have 1 million followers,
Mm-hmm.
but if your videos, like one was 10 million views and then everyone after that is 5,000,
Mm-hmm.
you're mailing it in, or you're not hitting the mark, or you're not being unique in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true.
So how do you is your TikTok page focused? Like, what is it focused on? Is it financial related, or is it lifestyle?
I now know my niche. So after like 2 years of posting, and you asked how I got into it. So I'll answer that too. So basically the way I got into it is I didn't know anything about TikTok 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I hired an intern, and I got her to do, I don't know, I think I was getting her to do PFP, personal financial plans,
Yeah.
for clients, just to get the percentages up. You know,
Yeah.
like good old big corporate financial companies,
Jump
right?
through
You
the
gotta,
hoops.
you gotta jump through the hoop. You gotta fit in the box. And so, so I got her to do that, and then she was like, she read some note that I wrote on my desk, and I was like, it said like, post some content on TikTok.
Yeah.
And
The
she's
vision
like-
board.
She's like, I noticed that you had this like post-it note. She's like, I know lots about TikTok. Let me help you post something. Like, I'll help you post your first post. And then I made another post, another post, another post, and then like some of them got some good views, and I was like really surprised.
Okay. And so is it financial focus?
So yeah, so I'll answer the question. So now I know my niche. I am in the niche business and finance,
Okay.
and educational. Those are like my two niches.
Okay. And so so how do you manage it now? When you're creating content or you're creating videos, how do you know what you're going to share, how to like script it? Like, because there's got to be a whole different methodology to TikTok video content creation versus the other platforms.
Yeah, so like I still wouldn't say I'm like the expert at this. Like I've had some success at it. I'm doing okay, but like I wouldn't say I'm not Iman Gadzhi. You know who that is?
No. Oh, is he the guy from the UK?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I saw an article about a guy who, like, in the pandemic started making videos, and now he's got like a gazillion followers.
Yeah.
But apparently his videos are like
He is
really good. He's
Freaking
dialed
good.
it in. Okay.
That guy is like, he's got a good video editing team, I think.
Yeah.
And like they've dialed in on it. Like right now, I guess my main theme is like, it's super weird. So like when I make a video, I'm usually like walking, and I'll put up the phone, and I'll like say something educational that is interesting.
Okay.
And it usually has something to do with money, but it also has something to do with anything. Like it's just educational in some way.
Okay.
And so the way that I always try to start the video is, so I have a father-in-law, and he has this facial expression. He always like acts this way. Whenever I say something interesting, like, oh, I'm considering leaving the company that I'm at. And then he'll say, oh? Or like we're gonna I'm thinking about buying another car. Oh, like that, those are bad examples, but like you'll say something that's a little bit off the like beaten path.
Yeah.
And he has this reaction. Oh,
It's his surprise. It's interesting news.
so then whenever I have a TikTok video, I always try to start the video in a way where Val would say, "Oh." So that's my secret.
And that's the thing. So like, in that way, I guess so that's sort of, is that a unique thing that you would then do that is attributed to the video, or like what's the intention?
My intention is to, it revolves around that secret project that I'm doing. So
Okay.
I want to, basically my goal is to build a brand.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to build a brand. I'm not selling anything.
Yeah.
Just building a brand. I'd like people to kind of, if they see my face, they kind of are like, hey, I've seen that person before.
Okay.
So that's, building my personal brand is the goal.
Okay.
Yeah, weird goal to have, but
It's fine. So I remember going into a high school to speak to the math class of an old high school teacher of mine because he knew I was in finance, and he's like, "Can you come in for this section and talk to the students?" So I went in and learned a couple of things. Speaking about finance to high school students is not like a famous comedian talking to a crowd of their fans. There was a lot of dryness, but some of the kids in the class were reluctant to take any financial advice seriously because they're like, "I'm just gonna create content and I'll be famous." And this was 6 or 7 years ago. I kind of out loud mocked the idea and was like, "You got to figure out your life." We're in a day and age now where it's a very viable business because I think if you can get 100,000, 200,000 people who are interested in your stuff, and it's a niche market. Like I know a guy who's very big in kind of like the whiskey industry, and it's not necessarily the number of followers he has, but the influence over those followers. He was making a pretty good amount of money from whiskey companies or from cigar companies or from lifestyle brands to market to that because of the influence over that market. And so you can do that if you have a brand that's very influential, even over a modest sized market. You can now make a living doing that or add that. So it feels weird at this point to be like, yeah, you just market yourself as a brand, and if enough people like you, you can make a living being yourself on.
Yeah, you can sell anything. Basically, it allows you to sell anything if you have a brand. Yeah.
But I think to that point though, the whatever you sell has to be on brand. Because if all of a sudden
has to be on brand, true.
If you start leveraging I can sell anything, and then you start, it appears that you're now selling out. Oh, that's not on brand. True. You're just taking money. Immediately, your brand loses value. So it's this game of like, I have to constantly be getting paid by the things that make sense. Anyway, so which I think ties.
You can sell anything that's on brand.
Yeah, that is you, which ties itself to, again, back to kind of what your brother said, which is like, if I'm just being me. And trust that me is the unique value proposition, then when my brand takes off, it takes off. And it's going to take off because I'm being me, not because I'm trying to be this thing. Because I would imagine there's so many people who get famous or approach it. So this is what people want to see. And it may work, but if it's not you, at some point, you're not going to be on brand anymore, or that's where it gets exhausting because you're like, I'm constantly trying to be this character that doesn't feel authentic to me. So I don't know. The podcast we have is very like interview focused. Come and join. It's very like interviewee, like which I like, but it also doesn't flow in the same way. This is kind of just like conversational and fun.
Yeah. No, I think this is a good way to do it. I don't know. This just feels natural. I just talk about what feels natural. The thing that got me an idea about this is because I think to myself, like, I have so many like great conversations with clients. Yeah. And with like friends, like when I go out for beer with people, like I'll have these like amazing conversations with people, and I'm like, none of that was recorded. Yeah. And so then that's kind of why I'm like, I think that's this. If you could just record these things, and like pretend there's no cameras, then yeah.
So this is then part of the personal brand building?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah. So like what I've been kind of using the podcast for a little bit is on TikTok. I'll just take clips. Yeah. And I'll post it, and it just, I don't know. They don't do so well. Like the only time my podcasts have like gotten good views is when I talk about like the financial industry. Okay. So we should talk about that for a bit, because like we're both experts at that. We haven't even talked about what we're experts at.
Let's get some content that people are interested in.
Like there's a bunch of stuff I dabble in that I can say that I think I know the answer to, like TikTok, but like I don't know. I don't know the answer. The only opinion I do have about TikTok though is that I don't think social media is like designed to like be like make a living at. Okay. I think it is designed for being a brand, and then if you have like a company already type of thing, that's kind of like what it's designed for ultimately. But yeah, I don't know. There's people that think they can just get views, and then all of a sudden, like TikTok will compensate you for your services, and they compensate you so little too. Yeah. Like we don't get paid in Canada, but I don't even care, because in the US, they compensate you, but if you got a $3 million view, you might get $300 or something. It's like not a lot.
So it's leveraging that credibility or that popularity to then say, here's the other thing I do, or to introduce it.
Or like, what have I seen? I'm going to butcher this, but like I've seen some people like very strategically inserted their brand. Like maybe they're wearing a hat.
Yeah.
And it has like their company name on there. And like if someone sees enough of their videos, they'll be like, what does school mean? Like Alex Hormozy does that, where he's wearing like that school hat.
Yeah.
And I looked it up one day. I'm like, what is school? SKOOL.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. It's a place where people can go online to give advice on whatever they're good at. So if they're good at like making videos, they can give advice on making videos. Or if they're good at, I don't know, something, they can talk about, or sales or whatever. And then people can subscribe and pay like $40 a month or something.
Okay.
Basically like OnlyFans, but
Yeah,
professional.
for educational content.
Yeah. So yeah, why don't we talk about a few things that we're actually experts at?
Okay.
Because we have like two experts in the room speculating about all these things that we're not truly experts at.
What are some financial questions?
Okay, well, let's start with this. What would you say is like the main question clients ask you the most? Like what's the real common theme where people really ask you?
Comparison is huge. So a lot of people ask, how do I do compared to, or how am I doing compared to?
Yeah. What do you say when they say that?
Oh, like I do with most questions, it depends. Some of the answers I give are, if you're working with somebody professionally, comparatively, you're doing better than the average person. It's
Sorry, I missed the first part. You said if we're
working together, you're doing better than the average. And that's
because you only work with people who have above average wealth or whatever.
That's one of them. But probably it's just hiring a professional. There are so many people out there who don't seek advice, who aren't in that stage. So they're still in like the wonderment stage.
Okay.
It's like if I don't go to the doctor won't tell me I'm in bad health.
Right.
Well, you kind of have to go and ask the question in order to get in better health. I have to go to the gym and find out how out of shape I am before I can get in shape.
Right.
So if you've made gone through this step to actually speak to a professional, that's above average, because most people aren't necessarily doing that. Then there's through the lens of, well, if you're working with me versus a robo-advisor or at the bank branch or at a larger corporate, like there's indicators that you're going to be slightly above average in this situation.
Yeah.
But most of it ties back to like, why are you comparing yourself to someone else?
You know what's really funny? I answer that question totally differently.
How do you answer it?
So people always ask me all the time. So like, especially like guys in their mid 40s will always ask that.
Yeah.
Do you find that? Or maybe in their 50s, but like
it's definitely, I think a comparison thing comes more from men than it might from women.
Yeah. At
So
least
how do you
from a
answer it?
financial standpoint. So yeah, I get that all the time. People are saying, so they'll say, so the question will be phrased something like, so like, how are other people doing that are my age and in our situation?
Yes.
It's like if someone's in your situation, then they're doing the same as you.
Yeah.
But whatever. So yeah, they'll ask me that, and I'll actually give them a straight up answer. So I'll be like, yeah, you're probably in the top 2 to 3%.
Okay.
And I'll like whatever I'll gauge them. I'll gauge like, okay, so you sold a business with your business partner for $5 million. You have a house in Coquitlam, pretty much fully paid off, and you're like 45.
Yeah.
Like you're in the top 2 to 3%.
Yeah. Okay.
Wealth-wise. And then I'll go down like income wise. Actually, you're not in the top whatever percent, but like wealth wise, which is what matters, you are. And so I'll actually give them the percentage.
Okay.
It's kind of weird.
How do they respond to that?
And they'll be like, cool. And then if they're like not as high, sometimes like I tell them, I'll give them the real answer, like you're in this percentage roughly, because I see it all. And then if they're not in the percentage they want, they'll be like, darn, I really need to get like higher up.
Yeah.
That'll be the response.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
How do people respond when you answer how you answer?
Well, a lot of people, there's an immediate peace of mind because people are very critical. Like, I want to be above average. Mm-hmm. And so there's a part of it, which is like, I always find it's the people who are concerned about whether they're doing well financially that oftentimes are doing better because they're concerned about it. I find it's those who aren't concerned who probably ought to be, demographically as well. If you're not retired already, at which point maybe you don't need to be concerned. But if you're in like wealth accumulation phase and you're kind of like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good, you might want to try a little bit harder. So I find there's a correlation between people who are a little bit anxious about whether they're doing well and them actually doing above average. So that's for me is like it's giving people that context. Really, if we're looking at averages, but then it's I think putting in perspective, and this is something that I've learned recently, that if you're 70% to whatever it is, it's called physical fitness. If you're 70% is most people's 110%, and you compare yourself to the average, you're going to feel pretty comfortable mailing it in. Because you're like, well, if I'm a runner and I go to a race and I'm running against people who don't run very well, and I finish in first in that race, and I'm like, well, I finished in first, I'm doing great. It feels good by that metric, but when you compare it, because you're comparing yourself to an average. Now, if the average isn't very good. So there's kind of two sides to that. Is compared to the average, you're above average, but compared to yourself, that's a different question. And what are you using as a comparative metric? And for me, again, I always try and bring it back to like, well, what could you? Like, what is your potential? Why is that your potential?
The goal? Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it too is like if someone kind of knows that they are where they've always wanted to be, and so then they kind of put their foot off the gas, I'm like, well, that's great. Put your foot off the gas if that's what you want.
Right.
But then, like, I find people who are just naturally driven, they're just going to come up with a new goal.
That's it.
They're like, okay, so I'm in the top 2%, but like, I still don't feel rich because I'm not able to buy my kids a house or something like that. You know, like that's the big thing I've seen people talk about these days. And
it's exactly for that reason that I think when people ask, how do I compare to other people? If you're the type of person who's super ambitious and when you hit a goal, you're just going to set another one, you can very frequently feel like I don't have enough yet. Yeah. I'm not there. Yeah. So then they'll come and be like, well, I don't know that I'm doing really good. Like, tell me how I'm doing. You're like, well, comparatively, you're doing great. But like, obviously you're not happy. Because you wouldn't ask that question. So let's dive into what's important, which again lends itself to money is such a psychological thing. Yeah. There are people who could have $1 billion and feel like it's not enough. Yeah. And those who have far less and feel like it's plenty. And so when it's that subjective, you really have to figure out, well, what does it mean to you? And if you live in this world where like, how do I compare to other people? You will always compare yourself to someone who's got a little bit more than you, and it'll never be enough. Yeah. And really, you could probably achieve a lot more if you stopped comparing yourself to other people and started comparing yourself to your potential. What do you want to achieve? Yeah. And I think of Alex Hormozian as an example. He was just talking on a podcast where he said, when I stopped comparing myself to other people, use this exact quote, which is like the more elite you get at something, the more you'll find that you'll achieve more than most people by giving less and less effort because you're better and better. And if you base it on external factors, how much money am I making? How much success am I having? Then you can stop trying hard. And he's like, I work harder now that I'm rich because I'm looking internally, like, am I pushing myself harder? He's like, so now that I'm comparing myself to me, I'm achieving things. He's like, I'm getting comparatively further and further ahead of everybody, but I'm not looking to them for validation about whether I've done enough. I'm looking to myself. So it's that conversation of, well, if you're when you ask, how do I compare? You're looking to feel better about where you are.
True. Yeah. It's funny because I'll also like what you said. I wish Alex Hormozi was here with us.
I know,
because then I could follow up question on him. But
get him on the podcast.
Let's get him on. I kind of like 90% believe him because I think it's like impossible to never compare yourself to other people too. Like if he says that, sure, but then I'm sure Jeff Bezos buys OpenAI. That's a false reality, but like he'd be interested and be like, oh, why would he do that? What's going on? Like he'd be kind of like, why aren't I buying OpenAI?
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's something that happens when you get to a certain stage where you run out of people to compare yourself to. Well, there's really no one else. I have to start to look inside and figure that out. But yeah,
I'm sure every once in a while it's got to happen to him.
And there's a healthy competition. I think there's, if you compare yourself and people who achieve more make you feel less than, then that doesn't feel like a very healthy competition. But if you surround yourself with people who you aspire to be, you're like, I'm just constantly surround myself with people. So the comparison is aspirational. Then that's obviously presumably a good thing. So it's all sort of the psychology. But again, that's our industry. When you talk to clients, figuring out where's this question coming from.
Yeah. What's another top question you get? I'm trying to think. Is there a market crash coming?
Yeah, there's crystal ball questions all the time.
Yeah.
I've found after 15 years of doing this, answering questions with questions is the most practical thing, because people like, is there a market crash coming? Well, what does a crash mean to you? Like everyone has a definition behind a word, and it can be very different to what does a crash mean? What would happen if a crash occurred? How is that relevant to your plan? I'm sure it's infuriating, because all people want is like an answer.
Our styles are so differently. I answer that one.
How do you answer this? I'm learning so much more from this.
No, I'm learning from you too. But it's like I'm just like very intrigued. I'm like, yeah, I should probably answer like that, because I tell people yes. So I say it tongue in cheek. So I'm like, is a market crash coming? Yeah. But we don't know if it's next year or the year after. It's inevitable. Like it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
3 years good, 1 year bad. 3 years good, 1 year bad. I'll show you 100 years. Categorize them into bad years and good years. 75% of them are good. 25% are bad. So yeah. That's
okay. Well, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Because a crash is invariably going to happen. I think both of them are. I'm sure. I know at some point that comes up in the conversation around portfolio management. But yeah, I don't know. I find increasingly I get more curious about why people are asking questions. Like, what's the reason? If you're asking a question about a crash, like that's good.
That gets them to explain more.
And that's, again, I'm just being really curious.
Yeah.
About people and where their questions come from and why they ask those questions, and oftentimes what they mean. Like, this is another fascinating thing: is we have an understanding of what words mean. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do, and I assume that everyone else defines those words exactly the same. So if they're like, there's a market crash coming, or you say anything, any sort of word, and I assign my definition to it, and then I respond based on what I think they mean, I could be answering a completely different question than what they're asking. And so I find it's much more helpful and slows the conversation down to just get people to explain themselves more, rather than jumping to an assumption and an explanation. And then at some point we can get into like, well, actually, yes, the market is going to decline by 25% or greater every 7 to 10 years, and this is how things happen, and we can't time the market.
I'm such a direct person. I have no tact.
Yes, it will happen. Buckle up. That's a big question, I find. I think people want to know like answers to like, will I be able to stop working someday? Yeah. Or like what needs to happen for me to not need to go to work anymore tends to be a big question. Do I need to keep working forever, or when can I have the choice of going to work or not?
Yeah. You know what's really interesting is like, depending on someone's age, what, like being in this business for as long as we have, depending on someone's age, what their most biggest question is.
Yeah.
Like if they're in their early 20s, their biggest question is, how do I buy a house?
Yeah.
And make my career the best it could be. And then 40s, it's like, how do I take care of my family better? How do I stop working one day?
Yeah. Yeah. And then later on in life, when you get to the, I don't need to work anymore. Yeah. And this, I think, is the most exciting part, is that like, then life becomes about purpose. It's not about how much money can I make and how can I stop working. And kind of to the comment earlier about when you've achieved more than most people, so there's less people to compare yourself to, you start comparing yourself to yourself. Yeah. When you've achieved all of the financial goals that were like the need to accomplish, you then start to think, well, what do I want to do? And I find those are far more. They're all important conversations, but that's when life starts to get super fun and interesting.
Which is interesting because, like, again, doing what we do, we've seen the progression of questions, and it's like, well, why don't you just start with the purpose question? Yeah. Because like the other ones will like take care of themselves. If you're not stupid, they'll take care of itself. Yeah. And if you're like, not stupid and somewhat competent, it'll take care of itself. But then like the purpose one, like, people never really start asking that until like they're in their 50s or 60s. Yeah, it's kind of you just start with that, which Maybe that's why I'm such a smart ass, because like I think I know everything. I've seen so many people go through different things. But I actually I know I do come off as that sometimes, but I really like I'll be the first person to admit that I know very little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, the more you know you don't know.
Yeah. Cheers to that. If I had a glass of whiskey.
Yeah. How are we for time?
Yeah, I think you probably have to go soon. 12:49.
Yes. That would be a good time to go.
Good stuff. All right, well, cheers. We'll cheers the mics.